Yep.
Right now, I'm with the Columbus Blue Jackets skating consultant and conditioning coach for the Ohio Buckeyes hockey teams. He's from Harrow, Ontario, a former Belle River Canadian and Kingsville Comet, and also a successful figure skater and coach. Lee Harris, welcome to the show, man.
Drake, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to some people back home. It's
Yeah,
been,
man. Just reminiscing at the beginning was a good little interview on its own. That was
yeah,
fun.
yeah, I hope everyone's being healthy and safe out there. It's been a struggle this year for everybody, but I like to come back to Windsor and visit the family in Harrow a lot. But obviously, with everything shut down, gotta do what you can do. But definitely missing seeing the families and friends back there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as mentioned, you growing up in Harrow. So what was life like out there growing up? I'm sure you started skating at a young age. So I'm sure that was always a part of your life. But what was just, it like growing up out in Harrow?
Yeah, Harrow has for a small town like all towns in Canada has a rich history of hockey. If you go into the Harrow Arena now and you look at the banners, hanging in there, pretty awesome to see. And I was just a part of that and had a lot of mentors, a lot of way that I looked up to. My parents emigrated to Canada when they were 19, and my dad played rugby for Wales. So when they came over here, they just kind of wanted to immerse, our family in the Canadian culture, and there's nothing more than going to the rink.
Yeah.
And my brother and sister, I'm the youngest, so they were already into the figure skating and hockey, and I was just, a rink rat from 3 years on, and got on the ice first and started playing hockey, and 6 months into it, my dad started seeing, like, if you're gonna be good at this, you need to be on the ice more. So he threw me into the figure skating classes, and there, that started it, and couldn't give it up for 16 years. So did both of them until I was 18.
Yeah. So obviously you like the figure skating aspect of it too, like kind of practicing and training and stuff like that. But did you ever get any like your figure skating, like why are you figure skating kind of comments?
Yeah, well, of course,
Yeah.
like you're gonna get
Did
that
you
stuff.
kind of like did it just roll off the shoulder, or were you kind of like, what's wrong with because you're a young kid, you're like, what's wrong with
Yeah.
figure skating, right? Like,
Yeah, luckily, because I did that at such a young age that I excelled in hockey because of the skating.
mhm.
You look at the hockey now and where the guy's skating is, it's off the charts because these kids are now getting that development at a young age. But nobody was really doing it at that time. And so me being on the ice so much and figure skating really helped the hockey. So because of that, I was flying out there and I was, pretty good because of that. So as you said, I kind of let it, roll off the shoulder a little bit just because I'm like, all right, well, make your jokes, but got a couple goals and an assist today, so fins the blow a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Like I always tell this story about a friend of mine. He didn't play hockey, but he was always good at like every sport in school, right? And I
Hmm.
played hockey, so we would go to Adstall Arena. We go public skating, and I
Hmm.
challenged him to a race, and he was like, "Sure, whatever." And he figure skated, and
Uh-huh.
he destroyed me, and I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, "What the fuck?" Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
If you're not, like if people don't really understand or like notice it when they watch figure skating from the stands, but we get on the ice with those skaters, you actually appreciate the speed that they're moving,
Yeah,
because and that's the thing, kind of what I've kind of done with the hockey and figure skating worlds because I've done both, is kind of showed like if you use your body and the technique of your blade and you're skating the right way, you're not using half the energy. So you're not looking like you're working so hard. So you look at some of the best skaters in NHL, it looks so easy. They're just flying by guys because they're just so efficient.
yeah. I mean, it's you've probably brought it down to a science at this point, being able to compete and coach and kind of study the game. So I'm sure that there's those kind of things are out there that a lot of people wouldn't know, right?
Definitely. Like I'm big into, like you said, the science of it, and putting the body in the right way and using the muscles, and that in the correct way to excel you and get that speed and things. So some, like I said, sometimes if it looks like a guy's not really working hard but going, he's just efficient.
Yeah, yeah. And this goes back to your playing career. You're mostly known for obviously your time with the Canadians in the junior C leagues and the Comets with Kingsville. So, what was that like for you? I'm sure being a teenager, it's cool to be like at that level of hockey and kind of in your hometown too, right?
Yeah, no, it was great. Well, to be honest with you, I was 15 years old and Kingsville started coming around asking me to affiliate for them. So I was playing bantam hockey. My team was highly successful. We at that time won like 2 or 3 All Ontario championships and doing really well. And but Kingsville was our arch nemesis. We, even now, if I think about it, like I get like butterflies in my stomach. We just battled, Kingsville had like some phenomenal players, and we're a little smaller, but getting the Comets to ask me, I was like, okay, I'll try it out, But yeah, being 15 years old, and there's 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, it was, I was a small kid. But again, going back to what my bread and butter was, I could skate. So keeping up with those guys, and I was there for a season and a half, and then I got my release and went to the Canadians, and I was there for 2 years. But again, I was around some phenomenal players, and in Kingsville, I had Coach Roption, who is amazing, and he's good at helping kids, get to their path where they need to go. Murray Rupert from Harrow was there, John Bizaire, who had a phenomenal shot, like just a rocket of a shot. Dean Mayran, who is a guy that you love to have on your team, but the next year, like I said, I was played for Belle River, and facing off next to a giant like that, a little intimidating. But yeah, and then I went from Kingsville. I think we were maybe second, third to the bottom, going to the Canadians, who were the best in the league, and kind of had to show what I was made of and things. And Steve Ott was on that team, Steve Mills, Darren Thorne, Craig Smith, Coach Mike Mazzella was there. It was a good learning curve for me. It really opened up my eyes to go from one level to the next level, and it was great. Really good.
Really cool, man. And one thing we were kind of talking about before too, just from my experience being out there in Belle River, Lakeshore recently, you really see like the small town pride in the teams in Junior C too. Like I said, like a lot of people don't know of it, but if you're there, and like there's a passion, there's a fan base, and it kind of translates into the players too, I'm sure, right? Like being able to represent that team.
The thing that I remember, honestly, is like how many volunteers, they had, like just working the gates and helping out with like just the traveling and making sandwiches for the teams and things. And, those are the lasting impressions that I remember. It's like you said, is, Junior C hockey, and it was, these stepping stones for these players, but they rallied around us. And, Belle River, I know now they have that beautiful facility.
Yeah.
But back in the day, we played in the old rink, and which was great in itself. But yeah, like the small town teams are, definitely huge stepping stones for players to, get their footing, find out what type of player they want to be, and get some great coaching along the way.
Absolutely, man. It's where it all begins, right? So it's the beginning of everyone's story. Like I always say, it's like high school. It's the best 4 years of your life. Everyone says the same shit, but it's true, and you look back at it, and I'm sure there's still guys that you keep in touch with, and maybe guys you're still crossing paths with nowadays,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, no, and I'll tell you what, when I play pickup hockey now, I still wear my Belle River Canadian practice jersey, and down here in Columbus, Ohio, and we got a lot of ex-pros that stop here, and like some junior and college guys that still play, and some Canadian guys, and they'll be like, "Wait, you're from Belle River, Essex County? Like, what's your story?" And so hockey's a small world, and it's nice to see that that they all just come back together and just play for the love of it.
Absolutely. And you're part of kind of two worlds with obviously figure skating and hockey, and they probably clashed and mixed throughout all that time. Like even during your time playing junior, you were still skating, right? I think it says you were part of Detroit Skating Club, so probably going over there and practicing with them at a certain point as well, right?
Yeah, I was just telling this story to one of my skaters last week. When I was 16 years old, I used to leave high school in Harrow, like early afternoon. They'd give me a credit for gym class to go skate. I'd pick up my skating partner, Alicia Fox, up in the city. We would drive over the border up to the Detroit Skating Club, skate a couple hours, come home, and then I'd probably have a practice that night, or
Wow.
So it was just part of it. I never thought differently of it. It was always something that, like I said, I started when I was 3, figure skating and hockey. So I was running from hockey to figure skating back and forth, a couple times a day. I think at one point when I was 16, 17, I was on the ice 6, 7 hours a day.
Wow.
But I loved it. I mean, I don't remember a time that I was just like, I want to do something else. It's like, this is it, So.
Well, it's quite the life to live, man. Rather it be one or the other, hockey or just skating. Like it's awesome. It's cool. That's why we do these stories, right? And these conversations.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like, you did the junior C thing, and then you branched off into competitive figure skating. So was there ever a point where you're like, I'm gonna focus more on skating, or was that even a thing for you?
It's interesting. It was, obviously when I started getting 14, 15, playing for the Comets and Belle River, I'm starting to get in talks from, junior B, and, getting some interest from there. And again, just because I could skate, I had speed that, at that time was a little different than, where the game was. And so in the summers, I would be doing summer skates up with the Tecumseh Bulldogs and for the Flyers. And I got asked to try out for the Leamington Flyers. And looking back, it was probably the best hockey I ever played in their tryouts. And I was getting some points. I got challenged by one of the veteran players to fight. I was never a fighter, but I stood up to it. Got beat up a little bit, but just kind of showing, hey, I'm ready to go. Let's give me the opportunity. So I remember standing. I think it was Kevin Hamlin was the coach.
Oh yeah.
And I remember I was standing in the hallway, and they're like going through the lineup, and you go in and they talk to you to say, hey, this is kind of what our idea for you is. And I'm, like I said, about 16, 17 years old, and I'm still figure skating at the time. And I walk in their room, and he's sitting at his desk, and he's got his assistant coaches around him. And he looks at me and he says, you ready to give up that figure skating stuff? Totally unprepared to answer the question. Wasn't ready for that. I was expecting I'm going to get a spot on the team. And I just kind of, I think I laughed it off and said, no, I don't think so. And he goes, okay, we're done here. And that was it. Wow. And at the time, being 16, 17, that was pretty hard. And I never got called back. I didn't understand it. But the next year from there, I think I went home, played another year in Harrow. We won the juvenile All-Ontario. The next year after that, I made my decision that I'd always been wondering about. And a year after that, I won the U.S. title in the United States with my new partner. So it was kind of like one of those things that a coach was real and hard with me, but it finally all right, I think it's, it's time that, if the game was, the way it is now with younger or smaller guys, quick guys, and, having the opportunity, then it would. I'm 5'8" still, 150 pounds still, My brother is 6'2", he got all the height, and, I think I would have made a different decision. But, I looking back now, obviously I made the right decision, and I think he definitely pushed me in that direction.
That's interesting to hear. And obviously, you look back and you don't regret stuff like that, right? This is where you are now. But I never thought of it that way, that obviously it could have been challenging at times, especially when you're not expecting it as from a guy like Hammer, and he's like, are you ready to give it up? Yep. And you haven't thought about it, right? So I didn't think of it that way. I thought maybe you just were like, okay, maybe I'll be more successful here. But you're seeing success on both sides, so I'm sure it was a tough decision.
Oh, I mean, at that time, like I said, I was playing junior hockey, and my partner Alicia, who now lives in Kingsville, we were at some minor international competitions for Canada. So it wasn't that it was just another hobby and a high school sport. It was, we were excelling at it. So having a coach come at me like that and being not prepared to answer it, it was difficult at the time. But like I said, looking back now, it pushed me in the right direction.
Yeah.
So,
that's a cool story, man. And just shortly after that, I think in 2000 you moved to Hartford, Connecticut, concentrate more on the figure skating career. That's again had to have been a big decision. So I guess we kind of talked about that, and that kind of probably alluded to what we were just talking about, what led you there, right?
Yeah, to date myself here, the internet wasn't that old at that time. I think 95, 96, so it's 4 years old. And Alicia and I had, our partnership had got to a level that it was like, okay, it's time to move on. Let's seek elsewhere. And obviously I wanted to stay in Canada, but I did honestly a nationwide search to all the big skating clubs in Canada. And, me not being, as 5'8", I needed a tiny partner, and everything's got to line up. And I did some tryouts in Toronto. I went to Detroit where some skaters were, and nothing panned out. And this woman, told me, she goes, hey, why don't you put your stats and everything on the U.S. figure skating site? Because some Canadians go on there as well and look for partners. It's like a partner search. So I did, and I was getting some, some parents looking for, their kids to, skate with them and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, this coach from Connecticut calls me up, and it's like, hey, my student is a national champion, looking for a new partner, and you want to come out here for a tryout. And I declined for a week. They kept on calling my dad, and I was just like, no, I'm still looking for a Canadian partner. Finally, my dad's still the barber in Harrow, sitting up in his store, and he goes, son, it's the summer. He goes, what are you doing? They're going to pay for the whole trip. Go. And I'm like, all right. So I flew out to Hartford, and I literally got on the ice with her, Colette, and skated a couple laps, and I knew it. I'm like, this is it. You know, everything just matched up. Our height, the way we could skate together, the way that we could spin, you know, like our unison was great. And I came home. My dad picked me up from Detroit Airport, got in the car and said, I'm moving back there. And 2 weeks later, I packed my bags and I was on a plane and left home.
That was it.
That was it.
That's
And, you know, like it was hard because obviously, you know, like I had to give up, you know, skating for Canada and things like that. Regulations and rules, we had to sit out a year. We couldn't compete, which honestly was the best thing for us, a new partnership. And, you know, we got to really get some new tricks and really work on our partnership. And when we hit the scene and were able to compete, we were good, you know, and we went like our nationals that year were at the Staples Center in LA. Wow. And I remember just staying on that ice and go, wow, look at the history in here. And we ended up winning. You know, like I honestly, it was like my first big nationals in an arena like that. And I was like, I'm just happy to be here. Let's just get on the ice and have fun and get the experience. And then the next thing you know, we win it. And now we're, you know, traveling the world competing, and junior worlds in Norway in 2 months after that. And, you know, and then just everything opened up.
That's so cool, man. I wanted to kind of talk about that too, being able to travel for the sport and all the tournaments and competitions that you've been part of, like you said, in Norway and stuff like that. But it's something I always talk about with people through something they love, skating or hockey, being able to travel and see the world. It must be hugely beneficial.
Oh, it was great. Honestly, and yeah, just immersing yourself in another culture and eating their food and just talking to them and trying to communicate, you know, it's just something that you can't teach at school. I was very fortunate. My parents growing up, when we weren't on the ice, we traveled a lot. They took us back to Great Britain a lot and things. So I had done it, you know, our family traveled a lot, but doing it for the sport and seeing other athletes from around the world and competing is on a different level. I think the next year after winning nationals, we went to Norway, went to Slovakia, Yugoslavia, Finland, you know, all these places that I never even dreamed of going. You know, so you know, it was phenomenal. And in 2006, I retired from competing, and the girl that I was dating at the time was also a pair skater, and we started hearing about some of our ex-friends that were now on professional ranks and doing shows, and Royal Caribbean having ice rinks on their cruise ships. So we're like, well, let's look into that. And we got the contact information and we landed the job. And now 5 years after, you know, for 5 years, I traveled the world on the cruise ship and skating in their shows. And talk about fun and, you know, like never expecting to be middle of the ocean and having this tiny rink and performing for people that had never seen ice and skating before, and making the friends like I talked about. It was just unbelievable.
That's what I wanted to ask about that, because, you know, if you just read that on paper, you're like, he was skating on a Caribbean cruise ship. Like what was going on there? So I had that written down. Is something pretty interesting. And like, that's part of a professional career, right? Is those performances, really, right?
Yeah. So I lost you just for a second there. But I think you're talking about the cruise.
Yeah. So the cruises. I wanted to ask about that because it seems interesting on paper, and like it's considered a professional aspect of a skating career, and that's something that, you know, something like me wouldn't really understand. Could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yep. Yeah, it's a funny story, you know, like I said, I started skating when I was 3, you know, competing all the way up, doing local competitions, Windsor, London, Sarnia, Paris, Ontario, you know, like we would be competing all over the place, little tiny areas, you know, and then, you know, then going to the big ranks and traveling like we just talked about. And then all of a sudden, you know, and doing it for the love of it, you know. And I was just talking to somebody recently, is that like, for every skater you see on TV, you know, their names, Elvis Stoiko, Christy Yamaguchi, Michelle Kwan, you know, those people are making a living competing and doing it. But the rest of them are doing it for the love. You know, the kids that you see on TV at the Olympics, they're not making a lot of money, you know. I had friends that went to the Olympics that were happy to pay for their apartments, you know, after the fact, you know. So it's in skating, you know, they're doing it for the love. So, and that dream of skating at the big competition. So I remember getting on the ship, you know, and you get paid every 2 weeks, you know. You're learning the shows. You're in this brand new place that I'd never been. I'd never been on a cruise ship before. I'd never seen one really. And then all of a sudden it's a city and you're getting lost in it and you're meeting all these people and you're tired from learning shows. And then after 2 weeks you get paid. And it's a first time ever getting paid for something that, you've loved to do your whole life. And I just remember feeling like, wow, so it was phenomenal. Like the shows were incredible. The size of the rink is, if you imagine the neutral zone on an ice rink and the 4 dots in the neutral zone, that's the size of the rink. It's 40 feet by 60 feet. It's tiny, but world-class skaters on there. The men are doing backflips, they're doing triple jumps. I was doing the crazy lifts with my partner, and it was a 45-minute show, and it's nonstop loud music, standing ovations from all the audience members, because again, half those people are just on vacation and they've never seen it before. So seeing it in the middle of the ocean is just on a whole nother level. But another funny story about it is that a lot of Canadians on board, the cruise staff, just the waiters and things like that, and they all grew up playing hockey. So the after hours, we would be in there at like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, at pickup hockey on this tiny little rink. The Zamboni is the size of a coffee table, and sometimes you'd have like Jamaican guys that work on the ship that are running the Zamboni, and I'm like, this world is crazy, like this guy's never seen an ice rink. He gets on a job on a cruise ship and now he's driving a Zamboni on, he's probably never seen a big rink before, and just amazing memories.
It's like Cool Runnings 2 or something.
There you go.
So that's great, man. That's cool. Cause that's like, for people that don't really understand professional skating, it's like you build your resume over time through not only competition, but through performances, right? Like a lot of people might think professional skating is just, like you see on TV, like you mentioned. So what other kind of stuff were you able to do through your professional career?
So yeah, I did 5 different ships, and for me, I always like to do different itineraries. Like my first cruise ship was over in Europe, and then we came into the Caribbean. I went over to the West Coast out of LA, one out of New York. So I like to travel all around. And, like I said, there's like 13 to 15 different cruise ships with ice rinks. But you're out there for 6 to 7 months at a time, and then you come home and you can, kind of manipulate how long you want your vacation. So there's a couple times that I went to Europe and did some shows in Germany, and it was an outdoor Christmas show, and it was so awesome. Like the Germans have such a great outlook on the Christmas spirit, and I think Santa Claus actually is based off of that, or was from there. And so they have these Christmas markets, and it's just a rich history of, obviously they appreciate their skating and their hockey. And so I did these outdoor rinks or outdoor shows there, and just an awesome experience. And all the skaters got to know the professional hockey players in town, and we just became a big family. There's Canadians in there, and found out that one of my best buddies from Harrow, Josh Zavitz, just talking to one of the guys, was roommates with him in Toledo when they played pro together. So it was like, yeah. So once you find stuff out like that, you just become like a huge family, and it was amazing.
That's cool. That's one thing I always talk about too, is like little connection, the Windsor connection. I always say, if you cross paths with someone, it's probably cool to be like, oh, you're from, like you said, even the guys playing hockey, like you're from where I'm from. They kind of, maybe make you a little bit more comfortable, especially if you're kind of on your own, traveling, living somewhere you're not used to, right?
No, that's for sure. And going back to the cruise ship, is that like you're there for 7 months, so they become your family. You're there over Christmas, you're over there like families' birthdays or sicknesses, and and same thing when we were in Germany, is that we're there for Christmas, and so are they. So we had Christmas dinners together and things like that. So it was pretty special. I look back on both those experiences, the ship and in Germany, is just I was very fortunate and lucky to have that opportunity, and I'll never forget that.
That's really cool, man. And, I think it was around 2011, you retired from professional figure skating, and your coaching career really took off. I'm sure you helped coaching in a sport like skating. You were involved and had experience, but after that, you started leading pairs to U.S. nationals and stuff. So I'm sure that's kind of what led you to the Blue Jackets, maybe the community kind of blending together. Did they reach out to you? Did you apply for a job? How did it kind of go down and getting on the Blue Jackets?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. At the time, I was dating a girl that was from Columbus, Ohio. So, when I was off the ship, I'd come here and just visit and be around this community. And at that time, the Blue Jackets were 10, 11 years old. So a very young hockey market. I'd go to the rink and, not much was going on like during the day. You get some drop in hockey, you get like, some kids for like a shinny like session. It'd be like 6 kids out there. Fast forward to today and you can't book a spot on the ice, so, but back then, I could see, I'm like, this is a really young hockey market. And when I was out in Connecticut training, my coach asked me if I wanted to start coaching and make some extra money while I'm training. And I'm like, sure. I've never really coached at the time, but I'd like to get on. And he goes, well, I got a phone call from a dad that his son wants to get on the ice and start getting some skating lessons. So I said, sure, let's get him going. And kid comes on the ice and he's a roller hockey player, never really touched ice before. And he wants to make the high school hockey team that next year. So we get him on the ice, and, roller hockey and hockey are similar, but there are some big differences when you're going from one to the other. And, I say to his dad afterwards, I'm like, he's going to have to come in here like 3-4 times a week if he really wants to make that team. So they're like, absolutely, whatever it was. So my first lesson with him, he's looking at me, I'm looking at him. He goes, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't know. And it was, I was like, oh wait, I got to coach you. I've never done this. I've been coached for like, let's say 18 years now. So, I start thinking, I'm like, what made me good? What makes my skating so good and fluid? And, so he was my first like kind of like test student. He was learning from me, but I was also learning my craft. And long story short, that after that summer, he made the JV team. 3 years later after that, he was the captain of the high school, the varsity team, and he went on his way. But it was the first time that I'm like, I think I have something here. I think I had some amazing coaches along the way to teach me what I needed to know, but also my understanding of the blade, body awareness, and just passing that on. So when I first came back to Columbus, like I said, in 2011, I was like, all right, well, let's start this. And I started getting a couple students and starting like prove myself what I could do. And the kids were excelling fast. And people started taking notice of that. So I'd get, more kids that wanted it, and higher level kids. And like I said, it's a small hockey market, and a lot of the ex-Jackets still stick in town here. And I got to know some of the scouts and things. And at that time, Barbara Underhill and David Pelche were helping out the Edmonton Oilers and Toronto Maple Leafs. And the Windsor Star put a big article on David Pelche saying that he started doing it with the Edmonton Oilers. My dad cuts out the paper and sends it to me. And he calls me up on the phone, or sorry, he took a picture and sends it, texts it to me. And he goes, son, get on this. You have this. And at that time, I was still trying to prove myself. And I'm like, Dad, it's gonna, it'll work its well. He goes, just get on it. So what I did was take that picture, call my friend. He's a scout for the Blue Jackets. I said, hey, we've talked about this before. You know what I can do. And he goes, all right. 2 days later, I had an interview with the Blue Jackets. And I had an interview with Chris Clark, who at that time was the development coach. And he had a phenomenal career. He played in Washington, 30 goals scored in the league, great player. Ended his career for the Blue Jackets. And so we're sitting there at Tim Hortons, of all places, and we're just talking. I'm telling him my story and my understanding of the blade and skating and my philosophy on skating. And he goes, okay. He goes, you have your gear in your car? I'm like, yeah. He goes, let's jump on the ice and see what we can do. So we get on the ice, and I put him through like a 20-minute like session, what I do. And he looks at me and he goes, man, I wish I was doing this in my career. He goes, this is a no-brainer. I think a week later, I started working for him.
That's unreal, man. Former NHL player, take him through that and probably beat his ass on the ice, and he's like, all right, you're hired. That is unreal, man.
Yeah, and you know what? At that time too, like you watch now, like that was 6 years ago, and you see these 18, 19-year-old kids that are coming into the league with the speed and power, so you still have that crossover now that you have some veterans who, they're 35, 36 that didn't get that formal training, that they're looking back and they're like, oh my gosh, look at these kids coming up. I need to do stuff in the summers to keep up with them. So you have this mix of, these veteran guys that need to work on, like old dog, new tricks kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm, at that time I started with the Jackets, and these older players are like, all right, I need to get quicker. If I want to stay in the game longer, I need to work on this stuff. So, I think that year it's interesting. The Blue Jackets, they started the season off, terrible. They lost the first 8 games. Todd Richards was the coach at the time, and he got fired, and the players were devastated because he was a player's coach, and most of the team started getting injured, right? So they'd get injured and they'd throw them out with me. They're like, okay, well, get them up to speed and work on their skating while they're getting better. And the guys are loving it, because, the thing is with my training, it's not, it's not just edges. It's not just body awareness stuff. I like to challenge them. These guys are world-class athletes, but they're competitive, right?
Yeah.
So if I give them a drill and they struggle with it, they'll stay there until they get it, and so they'll compete with each other. They'll be like, even this one leg like stuff, edge work, and they're like, well, I can't do that. And so they battle each other to get it. And in doing that, they're improving. So it was an easy buy-in for them because, A, they're competitive. B, they see me that I'm still active out there and showing them what to do. But yeah, it was awesome that, I got to work with a lot of the team that first season.
Yeah. And I mean, from the beginning of that team to now, like it's night and day, like the roster and management. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of guys come in and come out, and like you said, just be able to have a hand in helping them. And it kind of, I want to go back to before when at the very beginning, people asking you like, you figure skate, why do you figure skate? I was going to ask if any players had been like that with, you're a figure. I'm sure you're not bringing them through like the stuff that you would normally do. You're applying it to hockey, right? But did you ever feel like people are like, really, we got this guy?
Yeah, no, I never really felt that because, like I said, I demonstrate a lot, and I think they could see, my skill in the hockey world too. That's the thing is that I think I call it like a hybrid coaching style. Is that like when I'm out there with a stick and a puck, they see that aspect and they're like, all right, this guy definitely played at some level, right? And then they see my skating and they're like, okay, well, he obviously has some other formal training, and they'll ask questions once in a while. But I never really got pushback. And my experience over the 20-something years that I've been coaching, the guys that really like shy away from the skating stuff and don't want to do it are the ones that need it, are the ones that are kind of like insecure about it and they just kind of like don't want to do it. The guys that are good at it, they like doing it because they like to excel at it.
Yeah.
Right. So I really haven't seen too much of it. And like I said, these young guys are coming in with that formal training now.
True.
Like there's so many kids now, even here in Columbus. Like I said, when I first came here 10 years ago, these sessions were half empty, not even kids out there. And now they're sold out. You can't get out there. And there's a lot more skilled coaches. They're getting that one-on-one attention. So these guys that are coming into NHL and the league right away are just so used to having that like one-on-one lessons, having that like formal training that these older guys have to keep up to them.
That's really cool. It's interesting to hear because especially at the highest level and even guys like veterans after the career, like Chris Clark, that appreciate it. It's interesting to hear. It's cool.
Yeah. And the game's changing. I mean, like, it wasn't when I grew up, north and south and maybe east and west. I mean, now you have like everyone's doing mohawks, which is kind of like opening yourself up to, sideways on the ice and all that like skill work stuff that, back in the day, if you would have pulled this off, they'd be like, what is this guy doing? Like that's figure skating stuff, but now these guys are forced to do it because the game has changed so fast and, they got to be able to do this stuff.
100%. It's very interesting to hear. And one thing before we begin to wrap it up, 2016, you're helping out with the AHL team too, and you got the Hoist the Calder Cup. I'm sure that was just a cool moment for your hockey career, your hockey coaching career to be able to accomplish that. I'm sure at any part of the team, everyone is, like you said, like going back to the Canadians, from the volunteers down to the players, it's collective. So I'm sure that was really cool for you to be on the ice and hoist the cup.
Man, honestly, I remember, because it was up in Cleveland and I'm in Columbus, so it's about an hour and 45-minute, 2-hour drive. And after that whole night happened, I'm driving home and I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah.
I just was on the ice with like 20,000 people and a cup over my head, and just got my imagination going, and just, like trying to think about, kind of the stories we just talked about and where I've been, and what I did that night. And I'm like, what else is going to happen? But honestly, the best part of that whole night, and going back to some of the questions you asked about players and reactions to what I do and teach and stuff, I remember being on the ice and the guys are all hugging and getting the cup and skating around with it. And I turn around and there's a huge guy just standing there looking down on me. Like I'm 5'8", no skates. He's 6'3", 6'4", with skates on. So I look up and it's one of the players, and he looks at me and he goes, "Thank you." And he wrapped his arms around me and gives me the biggest hug. And honestly, to this day, I tell my wife, I say, like, if it all ended now, if I had, couldn't coach for whatever reason, that would probably be the number one thing, is getting some guy at that time, biggest thing in his life, my life probably at the time, and him thanking me. I said, that's what it's all about, you know?
Absolutely. That's a really cool story, man.
Mm-hmm.
And it translates from that level all the way down to, the minors. So I'm sure between the Blue Jackets, the Monsters, the figure skating, the one-on-ones, and the Ohio Buckeyes we barely talked about, like, you're keeping busy through all those, I'm sure, on a daily basis, just doing what you love, right?
Yeah, no, I've been very lucky. Like, obviously, I was making my name for myself with, what I was doing before I was with the Blue Jackets, but when I started working for the Blue Jackets, that put me in a whole nother level of people wanting my time and having them help out their team. So, and I absolutely love it. I mean, in a day, in a given day, I could be on the ice with a professional hockey player in the morning, a figure skater in the afternoon, a kid getting on the ice for the first time, a AAA, U16, U18 AAA, a college kid, like I could do that all in one day. And to me, I absolutely love every aspect of it. It's not just the top or the bottom, it's everything. I get to, intertwined with like every, personality and level of love for the game. And again, I've been very fortunate to have, my parents help me out along the way, but some phenomenal coaches. I look back to even my first couple of years growing up, the coaches that we had, like Bob Silic and Roger Ducharme, Todd Wilder, small little town, but like the fundamentals that they were teaching us and even the stuff off the ice still hold true today as I'm coaching these kids. Sometimes when I talk to a kid and I say something like, "Oh my gosh, I sound just like my coach," or just like my dad, and it's, I think that's what it's all about. It's about passing it on and being a part of the whole journey of it.
That's really cool, man. It's you've learned what you learned from your coaches and you're passing it on, right? So that's pretty much the lineage of coaching, how it goes. And I wanted to ask, how's it going in Ohio for like the rink situation right now? Are you guys like open often? Is there limitations? What's it like with COVID going on?
Yeah, it's been interesting. They shut down mid-March. Everything was, we were home for 12 weeks straight. Then they opened up very slowly, and you could only have a certain amount of kids on the ice. Everyone had to wear masks, obviously, and you could only be in the rink 10 minutes before, so everyone's getting dressed at home in the car. Standard stuff, but they did that all the way through the summer, and then they started having some tryouts and things. But there's obviously, everyone's seeing that there's starting to be a spike again. So, they're trying to do the best they can. They're cleaning, kids are wearing masks when they're playing, but it's interesting. And I think everyone's just trying to do their best part just to, be healthy, but obviously keep this thing going and playing hockey if they can.
Absolutely. Well, Lee, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, Drake, I appreciate it. And I hope to be up there soon, and hope everyone in Windsor and Harrow and everywhere are staying safe, and good luck to you guys.